Motshekga, we're back again. You've offered us an incredible video, one that a lot of people will continue to question for many years to come. We've noticed that it's a video that divides people smack in the center. There are those who are happy with it, and there's some that are saying, That's what it is. And that's why I'm privileged again that you have invited us here so we can continue this conversation. You will use this material in whatever form you want. I want us to, some of the questions that came up quite strongly for us were the history of our people, the history of a people as a whole, and where some came and colonized others. And there's a lot of continuing misunderstanding in those subjects. Take us to as far back as you're able to, in terms of our history, not only as the African people, but as different people coming, whether it's the Arabs, the Europeans, and the African people. Take us back just slightly.
Let me start by saying that, the information that I'm trying to transmit was gathered over a period of 40 years.
Yeah.
And in fact, on the 28th of this month, we'll be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Kara Heritage Institute, which conducted the research and gathered this information. And in that research of over 40 years, we found that there are three streams of history and heritage. It is the African stream, which is the oldest stream, the Asian, that includes the Arab, and the European streams. But what happened is Africa was much more developed than all these other continents. And Africa, especially ancient Ethiopia and Egypt, were the breadbasket of the world. And now everybody streamed into Africa. And typical of Africans, as very nice people, they have this humaneness, Ubuntu, Butu. And the people that came into Africa for food, for development, then developed the appetite to conquer and colonize. And now these colonial people started with the Hyksos. The Hyksos are the forebears of the Jews who colonized Africa around 1900 BCE. And they ruled Africa until 1575, when the native Egyptians, who were people of Ethiopian or Nubian descent, fought them with the help of the Ethiopians or Nubians from the south and expelled them. And now they then captured some of them, and that's why you found the Jewish slaves, the Israelites in Egypt. They were actually prisoners of war. And Moses came from those people. But Moses as well was the son of the native Egyptian woman of Ethiopian descent, which means the mother of Moses was a black woman. And now, but because Moses was fathered by a white slave, the mother could not disclose to the family that what she did was to say, I picked up these children in the water, in the Nile. Now, Africans as nice people, they brought up this child, educated this child. This child went to the University of Anu, the Bible call it On or Zion, and when he finished studying them, he was initiated into the African mysteries and given the name Osarsip, which means the prophet of God Osiris. So that shows you that the history of the Jews and the Israelites did not actually start until they came into Africa, because their history and their religion is based on the Old Testament. The 5 books are written by Moses, but Moses had no other education except the education that he got from the Egyptians, not from the Jews. Now, therefore, it is a big mistake that African people can actually base their history, their spirituality, and their culture on the Bible. Because, in fact, Africans had an earlier Bible, which is called Sandbook. In Greek, is Heliobiblika. Heliobiblika means the Sandbook, which means the word Bible itself simply means book. So any book can be a Bible.
True.
Now, the African Bible, Heliobiblika, was called the Pert Emheru, which means the book of the divine light. But, you know, given that history, which is much older than the Jewish history, we were conquered because the Romans who conquered us and the Europeans who took over from the Romans had no history themselves. They took this history of the Jews and saw it as the most authentic history and imposed it on Africans who had an earlier civilization from which even the Jews borrowed much of the stuff that they claim to be their own heritage. So all one is trying to say is that, you know, actually the war on Gaza, one could say that the Jews have shot down Jehovah and killed their God. Now they are godless. That's why they can kill women and children, because there's no God in them. Now this is the opportunity for Africa to say to the world, especially the Americans that are supplying, the Americans, the British, the Germans, who are supplying the Jews with weapons to kill women and children, and say to the Americans who are now provoking Iran and who are fighting with Yemen, to say to them that this godlessness of theirs is going to lead to a world war, the Third World War. So maybe this is the time that Africa must intervene. And Africa can intervene by taking the world back to the roots of humanity and how we should relate to one another as human beings. So I want, therefore, to start off by saying that we need to recover the African stream of history and heritage. And to succeed in doing that, we have to bear in mind that the Arab and European imperialist powers and their missionary allies imposed Islamic and Christian religions on Africa and suppressed the African spirituality. And these two are negating the rebirth, renewal, and development of Africa. And another problem that leads to this underdevelopment of Africa is the fact that the Europeans, when they came, they divided, they had a strategy of divide and rule, and divided Africans into tribal and ethnic groups, and suggested that they have different histories and cultures, which was all not true. So it means that as African people, if we want to move forward, we must look at how religion was used to divide us and capture our minds, and how tribalism, ethnicity, which are the product of colonialism, were used to divide us. And if you can look at the challenges, current challenges facing Africa today, it is endless wars, because African states that we have are artificial. We have artificial boundaries. You sit in South Africa. Part of South Africa is part of Botswana. Part of South Africa is part of Swaziland. Part of South Africa is part of Zimbabwe. Part of South Africa is part of Mozambique.
And even Namibia.
And Namibia. So where is South Africa? So if it were our choice, if we drew our own boundaries, we would have drafted something different. For instance, there are old maps which have been hidden from our universities, from our schools, which shows that the area, what we call SADC region, Southern African Development Region, now, actually pre-existed colonialism, because the whole area from the Zambezi right up to the Cape was called the Empire of the People of the Sun, which means Bukhalaka. And the people, the founder of that empire was Emperor Monomotapa. And therefore these maps are also saying that the empire of the people of the sun is the empire of Monomotapa. And then you ask yourself, how was it possible for Monomotapa to unite all the people in Southern Africa? And because he used African spirituality, he said, all of us, we believe in the Queen of Heaven. That Queen of Heaven called Mwari Wedenga, who was symbolized by the bird of heaven, Shiria Denga, which is today called as Zimbabwe bird. And that Queen of Heaven was also called the Queen of the Underworld, Sawanya Daja. In Greek is Sobdet, or popularly known as Queen Saba or Sheba. And then Cecil John Rhodes comes here, he hears the name Saba and Sheba. He immediately said, no, Southern Africa was the land of King Solomon and Queen Sheba, and that the mines which our people had developed belonged to King Solomon. And therefore, when you read the books, they will tell you that there are King Solomon's mines in Southern Africa, and there's nothing like that. But you see, Southern Africa, which include the area of the Great Lakes, is actually the source of the Nile, called Tamera or Punt. Now, that's where African people originated. Now, it means that we must, if we want to decolonize the minds of African people, we want to decolonize the minds of especially our youth and children, we must tell them without apologizing that we did not descend from Adam and Eve. Because if you make a calculation in terms of the Bible, Adam was supposedly created in the year 4004 BC. But if you look at archaeology and ancient Ethiopian and Egyptian literature, you find that by 30,000 years BC, Africans had built churches, universities, they've built pyramids, they've built obelisks. The whole civilization was complete. And then the arts, sciences, and cultures were complete. Now it is the West who colonized, after the Hyksos, Africa was colonized by the Libyans, by the Persians, by the Romans and the Arabs, and likely the Europeans. And these colonial people got this knowledge that came from indigenous African people. who were called Ethiopians or Nubians or Egyptians. So Africa is the mother of civilization, mother of the arts, sciences, and philosophy. But because the world, the Arabs and the Europeans turned Africa upside down, our people behave or treated as if they were discovered by the Arabs and the Europeans, and then civilized by them, and given religion and culture by them. As a result, we have lost completely who we are, and we think that when we wake up, we must ask some Arab or some European what to do, how to walk, how to talk, how to think, how to pray. So it means that now that Europe have exposed their childishness and their lack of respect for life, they have shown us and our children that they cannot be our role models. And their culture, which they use for imperialist purposes, they talk about human rights, but every day they are killing people. So I'm saying that now is the time for African people to go back to their roots. And I want to use this opportunity to explain where are these roots and how did we develop until where we are now.